Hello whiskey fans, welcome back, thanks for joining me. December the 18th, let's dive in, see what we've got. These small doors, they're always more of a pain to get out, but I'm getting the hang of it now, aren't I? It's been a while since I've struggled for 5 minutes to get one out. Label away. Silly hat, clean glass, smells a little bit of stale water. This one's just fresh off the drainer. Always important to have a clean glass when you're doing blind tastings though, you don't want to have to wonder where those flavours are coming from. Let's get some in the glass. Get that out of sight. So yesterday's Dalmore, a little bit disappointing. It's obviously an expensive whiskey, you don't get anything for a fair price. It's not even anything affordable from Dalmore, it's just all completely out there in terms of price. It really is a rich person's whiskey distillery. Try saying that 10 times fast. So hopefully we'll get something better today. Although, Deja Vu, that looks exactly the same colour as the Dalmore. Now, Dalmore is a whiskey distillery that's owned by White and Mackay, the same people that own the Isle of Jura and I think Tamnavulin. It's also the company behind Clydesdale Whisky Company, which is the company that makes Queen Margot, horrible blended whiskey for little supermarkets, as well as obviously White & Mackay. So White & Mackay is a company that's not shy when it comes to using caramel colouring, which I think you can see, even though Dalmore try to market their whiskey as being super premium, full of really rich sherry casks, a lot of their whiskies you can tell they're not natural colouring. And it's a little bit worrying that this one looks exactly the same bloody colour. So I'm slightly concerned that this is going to be another artificially coloured one. But let's not be prejudiced. Do wonder now if I should have done this completely blind without even looking at the whiskey, but obviously that would have been very hard. Let's see how it noses and hopefully we'll have something good here. Now, famous last words, I said about this glass being fresh off the drainer, and that had a little bit of a smell of damp water. I'm getting a little bit of dampness in the nose of this whiskey, and hopefully, if that's from the glass, I'm just going to try coating the glass here. If that is because I've just taken this glass off the draining board, hopefully that will go away. But I'm getting a little bit of a damp wool, slight damp dog note. Oh. And I think I probably shouldn't have taken as big a sniff of this as I just did. I would say that this whiskey is probably a craft presentation. It smells at least 46%, and it's a little bit closed at the moment, but it's not had long in the glass. I'm actually going to put a lid on there. I'm just going to heat it and let that sit for a little while I jabber on. But it smells like it's at least a 46% whiskey. Not necessarily craft presentation, because as I said, that looks a lot like colouring to me. But the ABV is definitely there. Let's just had that in there for a few seconds, getting a little bit of condensation on the bottom of the watch glass. Let's take that off and have another gentle little sniff. So that's definitely, it's got a lot more going on than it did in the Dalmore yesterday. I possibly shouldn't have put that lid on there to try and concentrate it, because that is biting me a little bit. I'm just trying to stay a little bit further away from the glass now. So there's definitely some character in there. Getting a little bit of sort of effervescent fizziness, sweet fizzy maltiness to this one. And I think there's a tiny touch of peat in there, a little bit of a smoky, sort of gristy, peated barley note. It's not a peat bomb, but I'm definitely getting a little bit of dirty peat in there. And that actually goes really well. I'm undecided as to what casks have gone into this at the moment, but it's definitely got a sweetness on the nose, and that sweetness goes really well with that slightly dirty peatiness. That peatiness, and it's quite subtle, but it's a really nice peatiness. It's not just a blank, simple smokiness. It's got a little bit of slight farminess, slight smokiness, and there's a slight vegetal quality to the peat as well. Possibly, I want to say that this is more of an island profile to the peat, but I don't think it's an Isla. It's quite a spiciness as well. On the nose, I haven't tasted this yet, but on the nose there's a little bit of a prickly spiciness. A little bit of a chocolatiness. So, at the moment, I think the ABV might be holding it back a little bit. Maybe worth me putting a drop of water in. I think I'll probably do that in a second. But based on the nose so far, this is pretty good. Let's see how it tastes. That's a bit of an odd one. That vegetal note that I was getting on the nose, which I think is a facet of the peat, it's on the palate as well. And it's quite a vegetal note and sort of boiled cabbage. So slightly sort of decomposing vegetal note, and also a little bit of a grassiness, almost a hoppiness, like the sort of hoppiness that you get from bittering hops, and a slight lemony hoppy note as well. So quite interesting. I think as it's having time to open up in the glass, getting some more of that chocolatiness come through on the nose as well. So at the moment there's two distilleries that come to mind, and they're both island distilleries. One is Talisker, and I'm saying that because of the way that the interaction between the spirit and the cask, and also that slightly peppery, spicy peatiness. And the other distillery that comes to mind is Jura, and I'm saying that because of that vegetal note in the peat. But saying that, I don't know what you can get from Jura that's at a proper ABV. I must admit that I've kind of lost hope in the recent bottlings from Jura. When I think about bottlings from Jura, I think about the Origin, the Superstition, the Elixir and the Prophecy, and I know that they've completely reworked that range now. The only thing that I can think of with Jura is the 18-year-old, which was 18 years old and finished in a red wine cask. But I think that was something criminal like 42% ABV, and I think this is higher. Nice chocolate raisin note on the nose. The peat really does sit well with this one. It doesn't take a front seat, and it's not like a layer on the top like when you get some distilleries that try to have a go at peated whiskey but they don't really know what they're doing. It just sits on top almost like a cask finish of peat, but it's not like that. The peat is well integrated in this one. A little bit of a saltiness, just a minor salinity. It's going to have another sip. That slightly aldehydyl. So aldehydyl is basically grassy, planty, those sort of green, slightly grassy notes that you can get in some whiskies, aldehyde and slightly sort of something like kimchi or sauerkraut, boiled cabbage, that sort of note. Moving on to sort of lemony, hoppy sort of experience. That's actually reminding me of some whiskies that I've had from Hillside. Now, Hillside is a distillery that closed decades ago, but most of the whiskies that I've tried from Hillside had that vegetal quality, and that's really a tasting note that I can only really tie to either Hillside or Jura. It keeps catching me out. I don't think it's definitely not a cask strength whiskey, because I'm drinking this really easily, although I was also caught out by the 12-year-old 52% Isle of Arran whiskey a couple of days ago. That completely threw me, and my guess was 4% out, so I could be wrong again with this one. But I would say between 46 and 48% on this one. But every now and again, I'm tempted to get that little bit closer to the glass to get a bit more aroma, and I just get a little bite, a little prickle on the nose. So I'd probably say 48%. It's an interesting one. It's definitely much more balanced. I'd say it's a similar style to the Dalmore Cigar Malt, but much better done. So the Dalmore Cigar Malt is, as far as I know, a no age statement whiskey. I'm going to guess that this one is probably 18 years old. Definitely smells older and more mature than the Dalmore Cigar Malt. But I think that there's possibly some evidence of some cask finishing gone on with this one as well. Definitely much better than the Cigar Malt though. Let's have another sip. It's an interesting experience, because when you first taste it, it's all sort of sweet, a little bit of leatheriness, a little bit of saltiness, a little bit of pepperiness, and that peat that's always in the background. But then towards the late palate and the finish, you get that big hit of vegetal, sort of slightly lemony, a little bit of note sort of similar to when you walk past someone that's smoking a certain type of herbal cigarette. When you walk past those people walking around in public and you get that smell, I'm sure you know what I mean. But that smell, that tasting note in this whiskey, it creeps up on you on the late palate, and I'm not 100% sure if I like it. It's definitely got character, but it's probably not something that I would buy all the time. There is something about this whiskey though that says Jura. And I think it's because you've got that fairly light spirit from those very tall stills at Jura, with that slight vegetal peatiness and a little bit of spiciness. I can't remember off the top of my head where Jura gets their peated malt from, but there's something about island distilleries, including Tobermory and obviously all the Islay distilleries, but island peat is different to mainland peat. Peated island and Islay whiskies are just different to what you get from the mainland. So let's see what it is. You ready? So Jura, so I was bang on with the distillery. Okay, so I was a little bit low on my guess of the ABV. I guessed 48% and 18 years old. This is 46.7% and 21 years old. This is Jura 21-year-old tied. So this is a whiskey that I have not had before, but I think that's a really good effort from Jura. I have heard of Tide, but I haven't had it before. I'm not sure how widely available this one is, or how expensive it is. Let's just have a quick look. Oh, that's Well, it's a 21-year-old whisky that sells for just over £125. So, sadly, in this day and age, that's probably around about right for a 21-year-old whisky. It's very expensive, but 21-year-old whisky is very expensive. It's good that it seems to be a reasonable craft presentation. So 46.7%. I don't know about chill filtration. I'm going to try and put a drop of water in it now, see if we can get any sort of cloudiness out of that. So I'll put quite a bit of water in there, so that should quickly tell us how much oil is left by how much haze we get in there. You can see a little bit of oiliness swirling around in the glass. So it may be that Jura have given us a proper presentation this time, although don't hold your breath. So 21-year-old single malt, dual maturation, so I think I said that it tasted a bit like a cask finish. Part of the aged vintage series, so it sounds like it's fairly limited release, but it is still in stock in certain places. American white oak bourbon, transferred to hand-selected virgin American white oak casks, which impart a slightly more spicy character. So, in hindsight, I can probably see that. But I think it's probably worked quite well. I'm not always a huge fan of virgin oak. I don't know if you can see, but that's gone a little bit hazy. Is it a craft presentation? I'd say it's probably on the lighter end of chill filtration, so probably not strictly a craft presentation. But it's better than we have been getting from Jura. Especially with that 18-year-old release that we had in last year's advent calendar, which was 18 years old. I think it was only 42%, and it had a horrible red wine cask treatment to it. That was really a substandard whisky from Jura. And that hurts me, because Jura is a distillery that's got bags of character, and it's a distillery that can do so much better than it is at the moment. But this one, even though it's very expensive, I think it's probably a step in the right direction. So now that there's some water in there, getting lots more notes from the actual spirit. In hindsight, those slightly peppery notes that I was picking out before, in hindsight, they're obviously from those American oak virgin wood casks. Hindsight's always 20/20, isn't it? Let's just have a little sip now that we've got some water in there. Sadly, I think I've killed that one. I've put far too much water in there, it's really killed the palate. It's interesting that you get a whisky at 46.7%, and the nose is still full of flavour now that I've probably knocked that down to probably just over 40%. The nose is still there, smells different, but just as good as it did at the full 46.7. But when you taste it, it's just gone. Lights are off, nobody home. Why can't this, not blaming Jura, because they've given us a 46.7% whisky here, so I can't harp on about them, but distilleries that bottle things at 40%, why can't they see that it just kills the depth of the palate and the complexity and the finish? Why don't they see it? Probably because of money, because they make a lot more money if they reduce the ABV. That would be the cynical approach. Really well-made whisky from Jura here, though. Would it have been better without the virgin oak? Hard to say. I mean, what is their reason for putting a virgin oak treatment on a 21-year-old whisky? Possibly that they felt that the whisky was just that little bit lacking, it needed a little bit of boost, a little bit more body perhaps. But was that really the case with a 21-year-old single malt? Good whisky though. Just don't put as much water in it as I just did. But respectable effort. Let me know in the comments what you thought of this Jura 21-year-old tied and what you think of the Jura distillery in general. Because I've been to the distillery on Jura, wasn't enormously impressed by the tour there. You just get the impression that it's just not run as a craft distillery. At least that's the experience that I got quite a few years ago. But it seems like they are making efforts to try and improve things, which, all credit to them, it's exactly what they should be doing. Hopefully one day they'll get there. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow.